So Jan, I was talking at breakfast this morning about juggling to the husband, and he's like, well, you have to be very coordinated and it's a bit overrated. Whereupon I had to say, no, I'm not really talking about juggling. So there we are, people who don't work in the art world. Men, love them. You have people like me on at you all the time, Jan, emailing you, ringing you, writing to you, wanting to have representation in the Financial Times. How do you juggle all the incoming that you have from all of us?
Very long time ago, a lovely old editor who was a man, I will admit, but he couldn't help it, gave me a definition of what editing consisted of, which I still remember and often think of as the emails pour into the inbox, which is that a good editor is defined by what they say no to. So, in other words, don't feel guilty about saying no all day long. Saying no to a huge number of things, because you do feel guilty about that, because you think, oh my goodness, the fear of missing out is strong. You think, every time I say no to something with, when I've read, the first two sentences of the email, if that, I think, oh God, maybe I've missed something incredible. But you just have to be strong about saying no, and then occasionally take risks. And the risks might be quite extreme, and of course, because they're risky, they don't always pay off. So that's what I do. And I suppose over the years, a certain kind of instinct kicks in. And that's, that wasn't a very scientific answer. And everybody will be going, really? Is that what she does? But anyway, it is more or less what I do. So let me ask you something now. You also do a very complicated form of juggling, which is that in any job to do with communications, you too have a huge number of demands, and you have to juggle the demands of needy individuals, both within your organisation and from the outside. So how do you juggle those?
I think, like we start with the news. Really, what is actually truly news, and what is. I try to start with, again, what audience you're trying to reach and why, and really think through where is the business going. And obviously, in the last 10, 15 years, anyone who's worked in the art world knows how quickly it has grown, how diverse the countries that we are working in, how broad the topics of conversation that we're having all over the world. And so again, how do you draw that together? And I think it is about prioritizing, where do you want to be? And being very strict about what will really work. I know when I speak to you that I need to be incredibly clear about what's going to work for you, and a lot of stories are just poor, and therefore you don't want to pitch them. So it's not very scientific, and similarly, thinking through where are you also going to move the meat of the business. And I think, the challenge is for certainly for my team is how do you make sure that you're really hitting broader conversations and staying relevant. 250-year-old business, I think the auction world can still be perceived as exclusive. So how do we make sure that we're really relevant and staying ahead of where and keeping up with all the innovation in the art world, and then also you just have the slamming moment to me is when the phone goes at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and a genuinely difficult story is breaking, and the reputation management, crisis management kicks in, and then everything else you want to do, all the proactive work you want to do, just flies out the window, and you're in a completely different mode. So it's just really prioritizing every day, but also making sure that you are trying to reach what you meant to do when you first woke up in the morning, which doesn't always happen.
So we're both talking not so much about juggling as about sifting, about trying to work out where the nuggets of gold are in this big sort of bucket of sand that is the daily churn. And I think the faster you do that, the more successfully you are seen to be juggling, if that's what it is.
Exactly. I think one of the challenges, and this leads me to my next question to you, is, the days of leaving the office at 5 and not actually ever being in contact at all are gone. So how do you, both in terms of the organisation but also personally, deal with, an increasing demands of digital, the increasing demands of social media, and really, I guess, an obvious question is also the transition from print to digital. And so it's a big question, but both personally and professionally, a quick note on digital and social and how that has led to a whole different sort of juggling.
Yes, we spend a lot of time trying to work out when and how to put things online, who reads them and why. And there really are very few answers. I mean, I get miles of metrics on these, all kinds of figures about, engagement and who and where in the world. And there's even a map in our lobby where a little ping goes off every single time somebody across the world, it's a map of the world, logs on to ft.com, and it just goes ping, ping, ping. You think, oh, look, Mumbai, or oh, South Africa. And you think, what does this mean? I have no idea. You just want to know that people want to read what you're putting out. And it is a very long and complicated question, because I think we might be beginning to learn that there are really two ways of writing everything, two ways of doing everything. That the old-fashioned thing which we talk about a lot, about you write something in the paper and then you put that online, doesn't necessarily work. So that's quite complicated. Timing is incredibly important. What you spend a lot of time thinking about is when people wake up, how long their commute is. So we literally think, right, that'll catch the American, breakfast, and that'll catch LA when they're commuting. And so literally, if you miss it by an hour, the story is virtually gone because there's another one. So you start thinking about things that, 10 years ago, journalists and editors never thought about, really, but now we have to, come up with all this stuff. Social media, it varies hugely. It really depends on what kind of thing you're writing about, because some things are all powerful on Twitter. Other things, LinkedIn is everything, because that's somehow, it takes off there. It's very, very difficult to generalize. And so we, as I say, we have piles and piles of metrics and analysis. And then there's also a lot of guesswork and and every single day we say to each other, wow, that one went well, why? What did they like about that story? It's a complicated thing. I use very little social media myself. I follow a lot of people. Personally, I follow a lot of people, but I don't do a lot of social media because I don't think anybody cares whether I do or not, really. Can be done. But I love watching other people and what they do.
Well, I think to do it well is actually quite a big commitment. I think I have to mention the Leonardo, and you wrote about it, and it had a life of its own on social media, which was absolutely fascinating. And I think that was the first campaign that we really saw had to live and breathe over so many different platforms. And I think, every week, how you integrate your communications, how it has to live and breathe, the timing of it, the different platforms you're using are, increasingly important conversations to have when you're planning anything. It is a really hard one to do well.
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
Jan.
I'll ask you a question.
Oh, okay. I'm not really used to being on the stage. I usually make everyone else do it.
Well, we couldn't really leave the theme of juggling without talking about the domestic realm versus the professional realm. My children are now so old; they're probably on some stage somewhere talking about dealing with an aged parent. So, we won't worry about that. But your children are much younger, still school age and at home. And I think many, many, many people in this room know what it's like to deal with. Listen to me, a full-time and demanding job and being what you might call a good mum, and usually feeling guilty about both, if I remember rightly. So tell me about juggling in your personal and professional lives.
Well, I'm not sure I'm necessarily a brilliant example because, as you know, you spend most of your life feeling guilty or a fraud in different areas. But I think, there's an amazing woman in the audience today, Miss Giovanna Battazzoni, and lots of lovely friends, Dina, who I caught up with. You know, the times have changed hugely. I mean, when I started at Christie's 450 million years ago, you know, you weren't actually allowed to wear trousers. I wasn't allowed to walk through the front door, and there were very, very few. You remember, Wendy? There were very few role models of working mums, and I think I'm doing a lot of work at the moment following the publication of the Gender Gap, and I've been speaking to some incredible people both in the art industry and also outside the art industry, and you can't aspire to what you can't see, and so I think that there's a lot at the moment about the new generation of women who are perhaps not conscious of being role models, but are in their way. And I think that actually, you know, over our chats, you know, there are having people who you work with either internally or externally who are great role models makes a huge difference. And I think we're very lucky. I mean, you know, my observation is that trying to be perfect is a huge error. Trying to look perfect is a huge error, and cheating is totally fine. And I'm teased at work because my lists are combined. So I will have Rockefeller campaign knit lotion, it pretty much in the same lift because the worlds emerged. And on the one, I'm very lucky. I've had some incredibly enlightened bosses, and actually Ed Dolman, who is currently running this fine place, was an incredible champion for a generation of us at Christie's in encouraging us to come up with some solutions for ourselves. And a group of us introduced flexible working, emergency childcare and dependent care, and we're very proud that actually an employer and Christie's has really been helpful in also helping us facilitate having a more agile working style. So I haven't worked full-time actually since 2003, even before I had kids. But that kind of trust that you get, I think it's one of the main reasons, not only in the art world, that you know, people keep their senior female talent, is because you're trusted to deliver. And it's about your output, not about your presenteeism, and that makes a huge difference when you are trying to juggle your commitment at home, but with a career that you're very passionate about, you've worked very hard to achieve, and so that's my observation. Definitely don't try and be perfect. Cheat all you can. Do as much on your mobile phone as you possibly can. Everything you can book, order, deliver. And I think we're much luckier than we were. But thank you to the trailblazers before us. And hopefully also this Pay It Forward. Let's make it much easier for the generation coming through.